In the book Turning Point, Miyazaki speaks about the difference between him and Takahata. Miyazaki was born in 1941. He remembers the destruction of the war and then slowly seeing everything rebuilt. Takahata was 5 years older. As such, he saw what existed before the war, saw it destroyed, and then saw it rebuilt. I believe this had a profound effect on Miyazaki's works, as many take place after a destructive event. We see glimpses of the destruction, but not much of what existed before. We mostly live in the aftermath. In the Valley of the Wind, industrial society collapsed during an event known as the 7 Days of Fire. The interpretation of this event is clear. Humanity had created weapons of immense and fearsome power. In the end, we couldn't be trusted with them. The weapons were deployed and led to the complete destruction of the world in only a week. Even after this event, the remaining survivors of humanity are pushed to the fringes of the earth as a sea of decay takes over the world. Of course, we find out pretty early on in terms of the movie that this sea of decay is actually the earth healing itself after the devastation, clearing out all the poison that humanity put into the earth and bringing back a purified land that can be enjoyed. This is the dream of all humans living in this terrible world, that the sea of decay will disappear and humans can live again, not in fear. The Valley of the Wind seems to offer a small place of safety in this world, but it is well known it is poison just like everywhere else, just not as heavily, as the winds blow most of it away. But all those who live to old age in the valley will find the poison's effects on them, and they will slowly turn immobile. So despite nature's resilience, nowhere on earth is left unpoisoned by humanity. Yet humanity continues to trudge on with existence despite never being able to return to their former heights. Humanity is regulated to the fringes and is by no means the most powerful force on the planet anymore. In fact, the Ohm often overpower the people of the land. The message, of course, is that humanity is terrible. We marched forward unchecked and then destroyed the world. Now we have to live with the consequences. And in that there's still joy, love, and hope. But that's not the end of it. The Valley of the Wind is a movie, but it is a manga as well, both written with creative control at the center with Hayao Miyazaki. The manga is one of the most brilliant and intense and intricate pieces of storytelling I have ever experienced. The sheer amount of creativity, humanity, and storytelling on display is astounding, and it has been affecting the way I've been thinking since I finished reading it. So, spoilers ahead, as the manga differs greatly from the movie in many ways. Key among them is the origin of the Sea of Decay, the warriors, and the place of humanity in the world. The role of the warriors is clear. They were weapons. That much is obvious. They shoot lasers that cause nuclear explosions. It's clear that billions of people on Earth fought each other into destruction. Even in the present day of the story, the remaining factions are still bitterly fighting a never-ending war, despite the fact that the Sea of Decay could make the entire continent uninhabitable by the end of the century, showing how incapable we are of saving ourselves when we cannot put aside our differences for the greater good. But what if the warriors were actually intended to be altruistic? It is revealed in the manga that they were not built merely to be warriors, but to be arbitrators. Their intense power was made so they can enforce their positions. The terrifying conclusion of this is that those 7 days of fire wasn't merely the destruction of the human race by the human race on purpose. The arbitrators must have decided that to end the fighting of humanity, they had to end humanity. This got me thinking of the real-world ties this has. In the movie, an elderly character exclaims upon witnessing the power of the warrior that humanity doesn't deserve protection if this is what we built to protect ourselves. The same idea is present in the manga, but the paths to the same conclusion vary. In the real world, we have a permanent security council heading the UN. Each member of the Permanent Security Council is a nuclear power. The world knows that nuclear weapons are an external threat, but each country with them can justify their use because they can serve as a deterrent. This has led some to believe that these weapons are vital for the world's existence, at least to some degree, because they have consistently prevented conflicts from happening. The US and the USSR, for example, never went to war directly, because the weapons would have spelled both their ends. But what does that say about us? The only thing that prevents us from fighting each other is the knowledge that both sides will die in the process. What's worse is that the countries with these weapons can serve as arbitrators over others. which I don't feel I need to explain has led to completely disastrous wars in non-nuclear countries around the world for the last 80 years. Fire has been raining down from above for too long, and then it will only take one misstep to destroy the world. In the Valley of the Wind manga, the question is brought up often if humanity is merely a cursed race doomed to extinct itself shortly. Humanity is quick to violence. That is seen all over. On top of that, issue is humanity's technology, which is furthering the range and destruction of said violence. And I believe it is at this point that Miyazaki's storytelling becomes so interesting. He is at war with himself, which, if I have to say, really does add to the conflict of his stories. Miyazaki is in no secret fascinated with aviation. Nausicaa flies a glider that is very useful to her the entire story, and that glider represents excitement and shows her love of the world because she's attuned with the wind. But it is a piece of modern technology. The same power of flight she has is in the hands of the leadership of the empires that are destroying the world with their power of flight. Miyazaki is not unaware of this nuance. His story isn't simply that industrial society is the worst and we need to live like medieval peasants again to be happy. The poverty that most of the world lives in is crushing. Miyazaki knows our lives are better off with the healthcare available nowadays, and knows that we are better off that we aren't all forced to do manual labor for the farms and worrying about if there is one drought or freeze, then everything is done for. What he is acknowledging is that we may be losing a part of ourselves in the rapid advancement. We may have been losing sight of how we are connected to the planet and how we are not more powerful than our planet. If we don't live humbly, we will cause our own destruction, and the constant search of power combined with the belief that we have full control of that power is when we reach a breaking point, as seen by the Dorok scientists thinking they can mess with the mold of the Sea of Decay and use it as a weapon against the Tolmekians. However, they are unable to freeze the mold properly like they thought they could. The mold escapes, and then 3/4 of the entire Dorok land becomes uninhabitable in an instant. So perhaps this is the notion that leads us to the end of the world, that humanity is the creator of their own destruction. This is the same conclusion reached before, but with more explanation. This shows that humanity is a cursed race, rapidly heading towards their own extinction. But at the end of the manga, it doesn't end with humanity's destruction, at least not in the way one would think. So, what exactly is humanity? At what point were we no longer not humans? When did we make the switch into being this group known as humanity? The closer you attempt to answer this seemingly easy question of what humanity is, the more difficult it becomes. In the manga, Nausicaa finds a relic from before the 7 Days of Fire, a life form that has been cultivating a garden for 1,000 years free from the rest of the world. However, if a modern-day human steps into this garden, they will begin vomiting blood and die shortly. Why? Because humanity has evolved in the last 1,000 years to live with the poison. The very same poison that causes more children to die before they reach adulthood is needed for a human to survive. The Sea of Decay, of course, has so much of a concentration that it will kill humans, but if humans have no poison, the quote-unquote purity will kill them. Humans have changed. It is still a clear line from the humans before the 7 Days of Fire, but they are not the same anymore. There is a vault in Shua, the capital of the Dorok Empire, where the last vestiges of the old humanity live. Living, though, may not be the correct way to describe it. After the world was destroyed, a group of humans attempted to save what was left of the world's knowledge. The vault will open once the Sea of Decay has finished its job. That's right, the Sea of Decay is a human creation, purposely designed to clean the world of the poison. Inside the vault are eggs, ready to hatch new humans stored in there from before the 7 Days of Fire. This vault has contained the information needed for many different empires to create destructive power ever since the end of the world. This information to humanity to change the genetics of life and to create weapons of war seen as a negative in the story. In fact, the final conflict of the story is to destroy this vault to prevent this information from ever coming to the surface again, putting an end to this period of human history forever. So the cursed race does come to an end, sort of. Nausicaa herself finds her act to be sinful. The new humans from the vault were supposed to be non-violent, unlike the humans in the rest of the world. But the information is destroyed regardless, and a new world is to be built from it. To Miyazaki, the negatives of this information at the end of the day outweigh the positives. At the very least, it is presented as an understandable decision to destroy the vault, because humanity has proven too many times they are unable to handle that power. But I believe this fits into a larger picture of Miyazaki's ideology that can be seen through his artwork. Let's jump all the way to what may very well be his final project, The Boy and the Heron, otherwise known as How Do You Live? This movie ends in a very similar fashion to the Valley of the Wind manga. A great collapse occurs, bringing the end to an old world. The world that film was run by Mahito's granduncle, who has been attempting to create an altruistic world that he believes is better than the world he came from. His reasoning is shown to be justified, but the actual process has yielded no tangible results. The world of the granduncle is fraught with the same problems as the real world. The parakeets have started a militaristic government imitating Imperial Japan. The pelicans are starving to death and have to resort to eating the souls of unborn humans. It is hardly a world to envy. As he has grown so old in age, he resorts to trying to pick a successor, but Mahito refuses to take on this role. In anger, the parakeet king causes the destruction of the world, and in turn, his own empire. The ways of this old world collapse in an instant. The parakeets and pelicans flock out of the tower and return to Mahito's world. They will have to continue to live, but the old ways are gone. Miyazaki's films end like this because, well, he's aware things end. He's not blinded by an ideology that what we have is immortal and must be maintained at all cost. He saw what that brought to his country firsthand. To him, the end of countries, ideals, people is an inevitable part of life because everything is in constant change, and that change isn't just for the worse. Nausicaa says this herself in the manga after learning about the change humans have endured. She says it is the same herself. Nothing is consistent. Nothing is forever. Industrial society will end. The world will end. Humanity will end. But we don't have to jump into the pit of despair because of that fact. Yes, humanity has entered its long twilight years. There are visuals which represent how humanity is now trapped on Earth forever. There were ships that used to travel the stars, but now they are used for spare parts. Humans only have the Earth, and that Earth is poisoned. Humanity is part of that system, though. We are not alien to Earth. The Earth is stronger, but we affect it too. We affect each other, both good and bad. Nausicaa realizes this too, that she is of a bigger idea that encompasses all humans, plants, and insects, and she decides to have a positive effect. She is tormented by the actions she committed against a Talmekian soldier at the beginning of the story, and she spends the rest of it trying to atone for her actions and bring back the world in a way that is full of compassion and love, not hatred and violence. Her convictions are strong and reveal an interesting side to Miyazaki. Despite knowing that insects are human-made, that doesn't lessen their lives at all in her eyes. A life is a life. We see how her actions turn military generals bent on expanding their power, turn their warships into refugee ships. And this is one of the most inspiring aspects of the story. And I was smiling a lot when all the characters reunited at the end of the story. What this reveals to us is the idea that our inevitable extinction derives from hopelessness, even if it is true. But when we fall into that pit of despair and believe ourselves to be no better than the worst of humanity, we only walk directly into the end of it. Kushana exemplifies this idea. She is a princess who is leading an attack on the southern side of the Dorok Empire. She had obliterated the city of Pejite. Her attack was planned by her own father to ensure her death. Her family had been in a constant cycle of violence from the beginning. Through the story, Kushana even shows hints of jealousy at Nausicaa, because Nausicaa is so idealistic in this world, and even at a few points, Kushana attempts to bring her down to her level, but in the end, she finds herself following closer and closer to Nausicaa's ideals. At the end of the story, she confronts her dying father. Her father had witnessed Nausicaa's true self in the vault, but was injured in the destruction. As he lays dying, he tells Kushana to take the throne, but then gives another word of advice. He tells her not to kill anyone in the government. Even though many are not exactly moralistic, he tells her that once this killing starts, it never ends. He found out that the hard way. In this final exchange, Kushana is able to move forward from her violent past and adopt a more hopeful and loving view of humanity. Miyazaki even confirms in narration that she does follow through with this and never kills again, and that she never officially made herself empress. The Earth will do a lot to destroy humanity, and we will do a lot to destroy the Earth. We do a lot to destroy ourselves, but if we put aside our differences and end the cycle of violence, we don't seem as hopeless after all. This story left me extremely hopeful for the future, and Miyazaki's compassion, even to the worst of us, shows how wise of a storyteller he is. There is no main antagonist of the story because Miyazaki knows it is more complex than that, and that's why I say this review is not at all complete. This story has too wide of a scope for one video, but I hope we were able to expand our viewpoint of the world. In case any of you are wondering, I love both the manga and the movie, but it was very fun in the manga to see more of Asbel, Nausicaa's mother, and Kurotoa, and the new characters like Chikuku, Ketcha, and Charuka. Anyway, that's all I got for today's video, and as always, thanks for watching.